Thursday, October 16th. Thursday, October 16th. And for Thursday, October 16th, our title is Beyond the Jordan. Beyond the Jordan. And we are going to read Psalms chapter 66, verse 6 from the New King James Version. And it says, He turned the sea into dry land. They went through the river on foot. There we will rejoice in him. I will repeat. He turned the sea into dry land. They went through the river on foot. There we will rejoice in him. So both the crossing of the Red Sea and the Jordan are markers of a new era in biblical history, and both carry symbolic significance. So we have read Psalms chapter 66 verse 6. Let us check out Psalms 114 verse 1 to 7. Psalms 114 verse 1 to 7. And it says, When Israel went out of Egypt, the house of Jacob from a people of strange language, Judah became his sanctuary and Israel his dominion. The sea saw it and fled. Jordan turned back. The mountains skipped like rams, the little hills like lambs. What else you, O sea, that you fled? O Jordan, that you turned back? O mountains, that you skipped like rams? O little hills like lambs? Tremble, O earth, at the presence of the Lord and the presence of the God of Jacob, who turned the rock into a pool of water, the flint into a fountain of waters. And that was Psalms chapter 114 verses 1 to 8. And 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 6 to 15. 2 Kings chapter 2 verses 6 to 15 says, Then Elijah said to him, Stay here, please, for the Lord has sent me on to the Jordan. But he said, As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So the two of them went on, and 50 men of the sons of the prophets went and stood facing them at a distance, while the two of them stood by the Jordan. Now Elijah took his mantle, rolled it up, and struck the water, and it was divided this way and that, so that the two of them crossed over on a dry ground. And so it was, when he had crossed over, that Elijah said to Elisha, Ask, what may I do for you before I am taken away from you? Elisha said, Please, let a double portion of your spirit be upon me. So he said, You have asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if not, it shall not be so. Verses 11. Then it happened as they continued on and talked, that suddenly a chariot of fire appeared with the horses of fire and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Verses 12. And Elisha saw it, and he cried out, My father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen. So he saw him no more. And he took hold of his own clothes and tore them up into pieces. He also took up the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and went back and stood by the bank of the Jordan. Then he took the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and struck the water and said, Where is the God of Elijah? And when he also had struck the water, it was divided this way and that way, and Elisha crossed over. Now when the sons of the prophets who were from Jericho saw him, they said, The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha, and bowed to the ground before him. And so already in the Old Testament, there are texts that link the two crossing events and recognize a meaning which points beyond the original settings. So in Psalms chapter 66, the psalmist celebrated God's redemptive act in his life. That is Psalms chapter 66 verses 16 to 19. Let us check out Psalm 66 verses 16 to 19. And the Bible says, "Come and hear, all you who fear God, and I will declare what he has done for my soul. I cried to him with my mouth, and he was extolled with my tongue. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear. But certainly God has heard me. He has attended to the voice of my prayer." And so by referring to the historical examples of the crossing of the Red Sea and of Jordan, I will repeat the whole statement. In Psalm 66, the psalmist celebrated God's redemptive act in his life according to Psalm 66 verse 16 to 19 by referring to the historical examples of the crossing of the Red Sea and the Jordan. So Psalms 114 also ties the two events together, not because the author did not see a chronological difference between them, but because of the theological significance that the two crossings share. So thus, both events are seen as contributing to a change in Israel's status, once from slavery to freedom, then from nomadic landlessness to nationhood. In these Psalms, the examples of the two crossings illustrate the change in status of the author from oppression, poverty, helplessness, and humiliation to safety, well-being, salvation, and dignity. I will repeat, in these two Psalms, the examples of the two crossings illustrate the change in status of the author from oppression, poverty, helplessness, and humiliation to safety, well-being, salvation, and dignity. It is also by the Jordan that Elijah's translation takes place in the context of a similar miracle to the one recorded in Joshua. For Elijah, the crossing brought the most significant status change in his life. That is, he was taken to heaven. For Elisha, the change is also important. The prophet's assistant, that is, becomes the prophet of the nation. And we can see that from 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 21, which says, "So Elisha turned back from him and took a yoke of oxen, slaughtered them, and boiled their flesh, using the oxen's equipment, and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose and followed Elijah and became his servant." And 2 Kings chapter 2 verses 22, which says, "So the water remains healed to this day, according to the word of Elisha which he spoke." So Matthew chapter 3 verses 16 and 17 and Mark chapter 1 verse 19. How do these writers of the New Testament imply a symbolic spiritual meaning of the Jordan River? So we are going to check out from Matthew chapter 3 verses 16 and 17. Matthew chapter 3 verses 16 and 17, which says, "When he had been baptized, Jesus came up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting upon him. And suddenly a voice came from heaven saying, 'This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased.'" And Mark chapter 1 verses 9. Mark chapter 1 verses 9 says, "And it came to pass in those days that Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan." So how do these writers of the New Testament imply a symbolic spiritual meaning of the Jordan River? And so the earthly ministry of Jesus as the representative of Israel follows the pattern of the history of ancient Israel. Jesus undergoes the Red Sea and Jordan experiences. He is called out of Egypt after a death decree. And we can see that from Matthew chapter 2 verses 14 and 16, which says, "When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt I came, my son. Out of Egypt I called my son." Then verse 16, "Then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, he was exceedingly angry, and he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem in all its district, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. And so spends 40 days in the wilderness. That is according to Matthew chapter 4 verse 2. 4 verse 2 says, and when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights afterward, he was hungry. So similar to ancient Israel, 40 years. And as a transition from his private life to his public ministry, he is baptized in Jordan. That is in Matthew chapter 3 verses 16 and 17. So Matthew chapter 3 verses 16 and 17 says, when he had been baptized, Jesus came up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting upon him. And suddenly a voice came out from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. And Mark chapter 1 verses 9. Mark chapter 1 verses 9. 1 verse 9, it came to pass in those days that Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. So later, Hebrews chapter 3 verse 4 recognizes the symbolic significance of the crossing of the Jordan and presents the entrance into Canaan as foreshadowing the rest of grace that Christians enter through faith. So I will repeat here. The earthly ministry of Jesus as the representative of Israel follows the pattern of the history of ancient Israel. Jesus undergoes the Red Sea and Jordan experiences. He is called out of Egypt after death decree, that is according to Matthew chapter 4 verse 14 to 16, and spends 40 days in the wilderness according to Matthew chapter 4 verse 2. Similar to ancient Israel's 40 years. And as a transition from his private life to public ministry, he is baptized in the Jordan according to Matthew chapter 3 verse 16 and 17 and Mark chapter 1 verses 9. Later in Hebrews 3 and to 4 recognizes the symbolic significance of the crossing of the Jordan and presents the entrance into Canaan as foreshadowing the rest of grace that Christians enter through faith. And that was Thursday, October 16. And the title for Thursday, October 16 was Beyond the Jordan. Beyond the Jordan.